Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
I'm a fan of classic movies.
Hello, and welcome to Overlapping Dialogue, a podcast of audio commentaries dedicated to discussing cinema that fascinates us in a way we hope fascinates you. We're your co-hosts, Kyle and Levi Huffman. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Levi.
We're brothers, in case you couldn't tell, and this is an introduction of sorts. We're going to be having kind of our very first episode coming shortly. By the time this is available, it may very well already be out there. But we just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of an intro. We don't plan on this being too long. Certainly not as long as most of these podcasts are going to be. Just to tell you a little bit about ourselves and what we're hoping to accomplish with this. As we said, I'm Kyle, and that's Levi, you heard just a second ago. And what this podcast is going to be about principally is just us kind of having a good time and doing some audio commentaries for, some movies, as I said in the intro, that fascinate us. Not necessarily our very favorite movies, although some of them will be some of our favorites, but some that we just think are notable to talk about in any given way. I guess, start with you, Levi. Where did this germ of the idea come from, and to you, what's it trying to be as we move forward?
Well, we were watching a movie pretty recently, and we were kind of talking during it, and we obviously, like anybody who watch a lot of movies together, we talk about movies a lot anyway, pretty much all the time, but especially when we're watching them, we'll kind of talk about them and talk about the movie that's going on, often more with movies we've seen before, obviously.
Sure, the more comfortable we are with them, the more we feel inclined
like
to do
if we're watching like a Godard movie for the first time or something, we're probably going to be a little more quiet because we're trying to take in the nonsense that usually is. Anyway, so we've kind of talked before about, maybe we should do audio commentaries and that sort of thing. We've kind of never talked at great length about doing that. But recently we really kind of started talking about it more and really thought that we could contribute in some way to a podcast because we've talked about doing different types of podcasts before. I'll talk a little bit later about some things that we'll do on this podcast maybe that are ideas for other podcasts that have kind of will make their way into this one that'll be easier to do. But ultimately, I think the goal is just kind of to just record conversations we would normally have.
Right.
These will be maybe a little different than the ones we normally have just because we're doing it for an audience, so it'll be a little different. But pretty much the same thing of us just talking about the movie itself, things, related to it and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and again, we're both huge cinephiles. Just to tell you a little bit about us, we're both from the foothills of western North Carolina, in the kind of the Hickory, North Carolina area. I actually went to film school at UNC Wilmington. Levi also went to UNC Wilmington for teaching social studies degree. And I'm actually a current social studies teacher as well, and he's in the process of becoming one.
Yeah, I'm a substitute right now, but I'm planning on doing that full time. And I was in film school very briefly there, but I kind of changed my mind before I ever got too far into it.
Yeah, but above all else, we're not necessarily film professionals, obviously, but we love movies.
Yeah.
We love talking about movies. As I said kind of in the intro, it's not going to necessarily be movies we always totally love.
No.
We actually got a few on the list of some things that we have maybe some problems with or some quibbles with, but we think they're interesting enough to be warranted to be talked about. So we're just, also, I feel like we should get this out of the way at the very beginning. We already know that there's a lot of film podcasts out
Yes,
there.
absolutely.
A lot with particularly straight white guys talking about movies. And we
Right.
know in some ways we fit into that category.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're not trying to make any kind of bold pronouncements or bold
No.
statements with this. We're just trying to stay in our lane, have a good time, and hope that you have a good time.
Yeah,
along with
it's
us.
just for fun. We're not trying to make any, like Kyle said, big statements or anything that hasn't been said before. Other than I guess our own unique takes on certain things aren't in the way that we go about it. Maybe would be unique, but
Sure.
it's
And,
not going to be groundbreaking or anything.
And I think it is interesting to say, talk about our own relationships to audio commentaries.
Sure.
Because, obviously most audio commentaries are done by the creatives involved with the movie, whether it be the writer, the director, the actors, technical people involved in various departments. And I, for one, it's kind of have two contradictory thoughts almost about audio commentaries in general. One of which I think they're incredibly valuable in terms of just generally for as historical tools to go back and see, okay, what was this person thinking when they did this or made this decision, or looking back on it retroactively if they feel like how the work resonates with them in a particular way.
Like, one example is always funny is the Joel Schumacher Batman and Robin commentary.
Which he very famously walked away from about halfway through.
And I think that says something about his connection to the movie and also other people's connection to the movie. So, there's certain things like that. But obviously most are not like that, and most are very informative in other ways that are good. But
so, on one hand, I think they're incredibly valuable and very needed for kind of film scholarship and film history. But at the same time, typically, whenever I start a podcast, or not a podcast, excuse me, a commentary for a film, it's usually for a film I already love or am more interested in, and so I'm usually just caught up in wanting to watch the movie again that I kind of turn the commentary off. Just purely nothing against the commentary itself. It's just like, I get caught up in watching the movie. And I'd rather do that than hear somebody talk about it, which is ironic because that's what we're going to be attempting to do. It's going to have some sort of a overlapping dialogue, go back to the name of the podcast, or a running dialogue over the course of the movie. You have a little bit of a similar, I think,
pretty much.
Commentaries.
I've always felt the same way about commentaries. I think that they're very informative, and I like listening to them sometimes, but I actually haven't listened even to as many as you have over my life because, I don't know, I just always like watching the movies and that sort of thing, but I feel like other people enjoy them a lot more than we do, so maybe this is a little bit for other people even than ourselves, I think, in a way. But I do enjoy them, I intend on listening to more of them just because we're doing this podcast, but I've listened to enough in my time to appreciate them in their own way. And like you said, it's usually for stuff we've seen a lot. There are going to be some movies we do on this podcast that we haven't seen as much as other movies, but I feel like some of the first few that we're doing, and ones in the future, we've seen a great deal, and I feel like it'll be very easy for us to do that. And it'll be easy as well for other ones we haven't seen as much, but I think it works even more for that. And also, we should say that we'll say this probably in many of the podcasts, highly recommend that you watch them beforehand, the movies. Because,
we don't recommend that this is your first time watching the film in question, just because we genuinely are big believers in trying to watch a film for the first time with as few distractions as possible.
Right.
We understand now, as we record this, this is in mid to late January in the midst of 2021, in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're all have been going through a period of theater withdrawal.
Yeah.
And so we all know that being in your own home, in your own house or apartment, wherever you are, it's just naturally harder to get rid of those distractions in the same way that a theater is. So, but the biggest thing we do recommend moving forward is we highly, highly recommend you've seen this film at least once, that this isn't necessarily the very first time you're watching a film. Now, if you would prefer to do that, you can, but again, we would just think it would be the best idea if you watch it. And also, naturally, there's going to probably be some people who are listening to these untethered to actually watching it, that they're just going to maybe just listen to the commentaries or the tracks themselves, which is fine, however you see fit to do it. But we would obviously encourage you to certainly have seen the film before, and then, recommend you preferably, hopefully, watching the movie alongside us. But that's up to you.
We're going to do our best to make it clear when to press play.
Yes.
I know that's going to be kind of difficult to sync up, but we should also say as well that we're going to always have it going if we're and we're going to try to cut down on interruptions, obviously, heavily, but if something were to happen, one of us had to step out for a moment, we're going to keep it going so we don't break that sync. I'm not going to be like Sean Astin in the Goonies commentary and just leave for the whole time. By the way, that's one of the commentaries I've definitively seen, and if anybody wants to have some fun, go watch that one. That's very strange.
One of my very favorite ones too is the Tropic Thunder
commentary,
which has a running gag in it that is carried over from the movie, of course, where Robert Downey Jr. is still doing his the character. I can't remember the character's name in the movie. Osiris? Is that no?
I don't remember, but he's he's basically that
he's playing
Russell Crowe type.
He's playing his blackface character in the commentary. And that's all. That's a funny commentary. I'd recommend you go listen to it. Obviously, David Fincher is very famous for doing a great many. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I've really listened to any of his, actually. I've heard clips from him.
I don't think
like him
I have
kind
either.
Of subtly digging at Ben Affleck, which is something maybe we'll try to do as many
we're not
times
gonna
on this pod
subtly
as possible.
we're not going to be as subtle about that.
But we'll leave that for another time. And I would like to say, while these conversations will obviously be informed by a lot of critical and technical and some thematic analysis, above all else, we're wanting to have fun. We're wanting to be as casual with this as possible. We might talk about a shot reverse shot or a medium shot or this telephoto lens or how we want to give the Foley artists a lot of respect too. You know, they deserve it. But above all else, this is meant to be listened to mostly casually. We're just trying to have fun with this.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the kind of the structure of the podcast?
Yes, so our plan is to hopefully have about 5 to 10 minutes worth of introduction going into the pod, and then the uninterrupted going through the film itself of various links, obviously, and then maybe wrapping up a 5-10 minute discussion by the end. So 5 to 10 minutes padded on either side, the beginning and the end, but obviously principally it's going to be the commentary
and
itself.
Those could possibly be longer depending on the film itself. We would have a little more to say, but I don't think we would need to preface it for too long.
Yeah. And then, we already have a lot of movies that we're planning on addressing in some form. We're going to try to start off with some movies that maybe are a little more familiar to you or you have some familiarity with. And we're going to mostly focus on American films in the beginning, purely because we think that's going to be a lot more easier to follow. Because naturally with a foreign film, you're going to be reading subtitles. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. But it just distracts you from doing that. But we might, as we go on, we might venture into that more. But right now, we're going to try to primarily focus on American films.
Right. Usually, frankly, and as much as we've been watching a lot of foreign films since we've been in college and that sort of thing, a lot of these movies are movies we've seen years ago that we've seen a great deal. Right. And there are some that are newer that we've seen less times, but I feel like that's easier. But maybe on down the line we'll try to focus more on stuff like that. But
and we do have some plans for some mini series within this pod,
right? In
terms of talking about certain talents, certain film franchises. We already have a few circled of wanting to do the whole franchise, and then also some more thematic ideas. And you were talking about how this came from the ideas of some other podcasts. We're going to try to incorporate one of those into this if you want to talk
basically,
about that.
I've always been, this is the most random thing ever, but I've always been really fascinated with movies that are named after the main character or a character in the film, like Forrest Gump or Jerry Maguire or even Malcolm X or even Marnie, or, it can be a full name or a shortened name. But I've always been interested in the idea of just calling a movie what the name of the main person at Michael Clayton. There's all kinds of movies, but just and I've always been kind of interested in that, just in the sense of even asking the question, and I feel like I could never even answer this question as detailed as I would want to with each movie, but the idea of why is it that this movie is called Michael Clayton? Could it have been called the Monsanto case or whatever? Could it have been called something else? Like
I'm Shiva, God of Death.
I'm Shiva, God of Death.
Yeah.
Or flip phone.
He was running in the street. It's like,
no, we need to get him into the mix. Or the flip phone brigade with that movie. Whatever. But yeah, I've just always been kind of fascinated by that idea. So originally, I had the idea for a podcast that would be not even commentaries, but just really talking about a movie for a long period of time. And it would be called Above the Title. Would have been the name of it. And and you would kind of talk about the movie for a long period of time, and then you would at the end basically say, should this have been called Marnie, or should this have been called Michael Clayton, or whatever. But I feel like doing this podcast, we could very easily do, every now and then we do like a mini series of movies like Jerry Maguire or Michael Clayton or Marnie or Forrest Gump or whatever. These certain movies that you would talk about in a series that we would do. That's just one example. Or like we said, another idea we had is of like doing Arthur Penn's Night Moves and Kelly Reichardt's Night Moves is like a double feature, basically.
Yeah, we're going to try to be, the whole conceit of this podcast is relatively straightforward in terms of audio commentaries.
Yeah, right.
But within that, we're going to try to experiment and try to do sometimes thematically wed the films with one another, and we'll see how that develops as we go along. We also are opening ourselves up to maybe doing, certain podcasts where we maybe do a top 5 or a top 10 of any given topic, whether it be the end of the year or just something that's going on or talking about, if we're memorializing possibly certain talents, we can maybe have discussions relating to them. So we're really, the conceit of this, as I said, the conceit of this podcast is pretty straightforward in terms of we're doing audio commentaries of films, but the certain types of films that we go into and the various ways in which we're going to explore them, I think are going to have a lot of variety to it. Is there anything else we need to cover? I think we covered most of it. Please pardon the shuffling of the papers here.
We talked about, let's see. Yeah, I think we pretty much talked about everything, I guess. But yeah, like we said, we have a lot of movies planned. Most of these are going to be movies you've heard of or have at least heard of. Some of them will be a little more obscure. But for the most part, they're movies that we're all pretty familiar with, I would think.
And I'll go ahead and say, too, we'll be taking, all kinds of comments, requests, and I encourage you to send that to no underscores, no spaces on this, Huffman Brothers Productions. That's Huffman Brothers Productions at gmail.com. Again, that's Huffman Brothers Productions at gmail.com. And again, I encourage you to send any questions, comments, concerns, requests, of course, as well. There's films you're interested in. And again, a lot of these movies we're going to be talking about, we already have kind of the first 10 loosely outlined. We have a history with and a certain familiarity with. And I believe I would go as far as to say we pretty much love, in some form or another, all of these films that we're going to be talking about. There's a few that are more in the maybe guilty pleasures category.
Or that we just feel like we have some things we need to say about for a couple episodes. But most,
because I'm looking at a few of these and I can think of specific stories and context that we saw them under, or they exist in our brains to this day. So,
so I guess, do you want to tell them what the first?
Yeah, we'll go as far as to say this. The very first one we're going to be doing is a film I'm sure you're all familiar with or know and love in some regard. Jurassic Park, Steven Spielberg's dinosaur classic of sorts. Now, Levi actually will do a little brief preview of this, I guess. Levi actually has history of reading the Michael Crichton book.
I went through a Michael Crichton phase in high school, and I read quite a few of his books. I don't really haven't read any in a long time, and I don't frankly care to be honest, because I've kind of moved on to... No offense to Michael Crichton. Don't mean to demean the dead or anything, speak ill of the dead, but a certain of his books really meant a lot to me early on when I was reading a lot of like Stephen King. Now, Stephen King's somebody I still really go back to, but when I was really starting to get into reading a lot more, I've kind of moved on to a lot of more literary things now, but that, I read the novel and it was okay. The movie's better, but I'll have more to say about that, I guess, a little bit, but when we...
Yeah, so we wanted to pick something early on that everybody had a familiarity with. That was going to be an easy start.
And that's a movie we've seen a lot when we had the... It was interesting. Those were the types of... We can talk more about this when we do it too, but that was one of those movies like Jaws and like Jurassic Park that had those like double VHS packs, then the sleeve VHSs that would have the movie, and then it would have like a... making of documentary with it, and we watched the crap out of those.
That one was narrated by James Earl Jones, I remember.
Oh, okay.
The documentary.
Yeah, I watched the documentary for the Jaws one a little bit more, but Jaws is one of my favorite movies anyway. But anyway,
so we wanted to start off with something that we're pretty familiar with, and we figured most of you guys would be familiar with. And that's where it's going to be. I guess you have anything else to say for this? Or
I don't think so, other than that we hope you enjoy it. And it, like I said, it's a pretty simple idea, and but we're very interested in seeing where it goes. And the good thing about this is it's an unlimited amount that we can talk about movies until we're dead, I guess, until or however long we want to do this podcast.
yeah, which
so.
God willing is long.
Yep,
long time
hopefully
from
so.
now. So again, this is Kyle,
And this is Levi.
and we hope to hear and see you soon. Take care.